to a place where nightmares come to life. Tonight, we delve into the dark history of Greywater Asylum, a place where the walls are stained with the blood of the forgotten. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe, if you dare, because once you enter this story, there may be no way out. Before we begin, I only ask you for a free favor: subscribe to my channel as an encouragement for me to do more videos. Let's dive into The Haunting of Greywater Asylum, a blood-stained legacy. In the remote town of Hollow Creek, Greywater Asylum looms like a festering wound on the landscape. The asylum, long abandoned, is notorious for the horrors that occurred within its walls. Built on cursed ground, where an ancient village was once decimated by plague, the asylum's history is soaked in blood. The asylum was shut down in 1948 after a string of gruesome and unexplained deaths. Patients were found mutilated in their rooms, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways, as if something had torn them apart from the inside. The staff, too, met horrific ends. Nurses and doctors were discovered with their throats slit, their eyes gouged out, and their blood smeared across the walls in strange, cryptic symbols. One stormy evening, a group of college students decided to investigate the haunted asylum, lured by the thrill of encountering the supernatural. Armed with only flashlights and a video camera, they ventured inside, ignoring the locals' warnings. The air within was heavy with the stench of rot and decay, and something far more sinister. As they moved deeper into the asylum, the students began to hear faint screams, agonized, blood-curdling wails that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The flickering beams of their flashlights revealed dark stains on the floors and walls, remnants of the blood that had been spilled decades ago. The shadows around them seemed to move, stretching like blackened fingers eager to grasp their souls. In one of the hallways, they stumbled upon an old treatment room. Inside, the rusted, blood-splattered tools lay abandoned, as if the doctors had left in a hurry. In the corner of the room was a large iron table with thick leather straps. The straps were still stained with dried blood, and on the floor, they found a human skull, its jaw cracked open as if it had been crushed. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the asylum, and the doors to the room slammed shut, trapping them inside. The temperature dropped rapidly, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. One of the students, Lisa, began to scream as she looked down at her hands. Her skin was bubbling, melting away as if eaten by acid. The others watched in horror as her flesh dissolved, exposing bone and sinew, until she collapsed in a pool of her own blood. Panic set in as they tried to escape, but the doors wouldn't budge. The walls began to bleed, dark red rivulets streaming down, and the screams of the tortured patients grew louder, reverberating through the building. Mark, the group's leader, felt something cold wrap around his ankle. He looked down to see a bloodied hand reaching up from the floor, pulling him down. He struggled, but more hands emerged, tearing at his legs, ripping his flesh apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but blood and bone. The remaining students ran, desperate to find a way out. They turned a corner and froze at the sight before them. A figure stood in the hallway, its face covered in a blood-stained surgical mask, holding a scalpel in one hand and a jar filled with eyes in the other. The figure moved towards them slowly, deliberately, the sound of metal scraping against the walls echoing with each step. One by one, the students met their gruesome ends. Jenna was caught by the figure and strapped to an old, rusty gurney. She screamed as it began to cut into her, removing organs with surgical precision. While she was still conscious, Her blood splattered across the walls as her screams faded into gurgles. Another student, Chris, tried to hide in a closet, only to have the walls close in on him, crushing him into a bloody pulp, his bones snapping like twigs. The last survivor, Sam, managed to find his way back to the entrance, but as he reached the door, it slammed shut in his face. Behind him, he heard the sound of the scalpel scraping the floor. He turned to see the figure, now covered in the blood of his friends, raising the scalpel high. The last thing Sam saw was the gleam of the blade before it plunged into his chest, carving out his heart. The next morning, the townsfolk found the asylum's doors wide open, but the students were never seen again. The video camera was discovered near the entrance, covered in blood. When they played the footage, all they could see were flashes of twisted faces, blood-soaked walls, and the final image of the figure holding Sam's still beating heart, its hollow eyes filled with a hatred that defied death. Greywater Asylum remains a place of unspeakable horror, and those who dared to approach it at night claim they can still hear the screams of the students and see blood oozing from the walls, as if the building itself hungers for more. Greywater Asylum claimed their souls, and now their screams echo through eternity. If you managed to survive this tale, remember to subscribe. But beware. The next story might just be your last.